This episode is sponsored by Delaware Hyperbarics. Reduce your symptoms, speed your recovery, and reclaim your body at Delaware Hyperbarics, located in Lewes, Delaware. Their facility offers hyperbaric chambers, therapeutic massage, myofascial release, extracorporeal pulse activation therapy, red light therapy, low-level laser therapy, massage for motor vehicle accidents, active isolated stretching, and infrared saunas. To learn more, you can go to DelawareHyperbarics.com or call 302-313-5555. Crosstown Walkers has partnered with New Light CBD for these podcast episodes. If you use CBD as a product to help with your pain management or mental health, all Crosstown Walker listeners can use promo code CTW at newlightcbd.com to receive 10% off your order with New Light CBD. That is NULIGHTCBD.com using promo code CTW. This promo code will be valid until the end of the month. New Light CBD is offering free shipping as well for the end of the month for all listeners. New Light CBD is established and manufactured in the first town in the first state of Lewes, Delaware. To make a donation to the Crosstown Walkers NAMI fundraiser, you can head over to donate.nami.org/crosstownwalkers. You can also head over to crosstownwalkers.com/fundraiser to stay up to date with all the latest information regarding the fundraiser. All patrons will be entered into our gift raffle for a chance to win one of the following items: a CBD bundle full of various products from New Light CBD, 5 infrared sauna sessions at Delaware Hyperbarics, a free brain mapping at Brain Love Neurotherapy, a $250 value for you to learn how your brain is functioning. This involves 2 50-minute sessions, one to get EEG mapped and the second to review your brain maps. And lastly, Lynn McDonald's first book, The Great Tree and the Ladybug. For any questions, you can email devincanfield@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media via Instagram. If you would like to extend your support to Crosstown Walkers, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/CTWmusic.
My name is Lisa Graff, and I am a retired teacher from the Maryland area, from Montgomery County Public Schools. Taught every grade from pre-K all the way to 12, which is interesting, and retired down here to Delaware in 2010, very young. My husband was itching to get out of the DC area, so I was young, 56, and had success as a writer when I took time off to raise 2 children. So I decided I needed to resume that passion. And I actually thought, retirement, that's really not a word that I know about. What am I going to do? How am I going to fill the time? I thought I can't be the only person that's thinking that way, even no matter what age you are. So I made up some fake columns written from different people and pretended they were, had been sent to me. And then I responded to them and I sent it to the Cape Gazette. And the editor, Trish Vernon, said, "This looks great. Let's do this." So the column was called Retirement 101. But it's really morphed into something larger because that was at the beginning, and people that have been retired 10 years or 15 years are not going through the same kinds of changes that someone is initially, although everybody goes through changes. So I changed the column to our senior living. In high school, you read the yearbook. What were they in Key Club and cheerleading and track? What are they doing now that they're older? So, and then I worked on a novel that had been brewing and had started very, very long time ago about how a family reacts to the disease of alcoholism, which kind of relates to your topic today about mental health struggles. My father was what they call our qualifier. If you go to treatment programs, you often refer to a person that has the disease as your qualifier. And his disease, I think, had a profound effect on the children and my mother. And I do think it was related to his time in the Army initially, which is why it's great that you and I are talking today. Today is Veterans Day, and my father lied about his age to enlist in the Army when he was 17 and was a paratrooper. One of those men who jumped out of the airplane in France to, on the beaches of Normandy.
Well, God
and
bless.
he was
That's
shot.
amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I think today it's so important still it's amazing because you watch the news and there are still some World War II veterans, and there's still so many different wars that have occurred as well. So yeah, that book came out in 2017. It's called Find Me Alone. And the title came from a poem that I wrote in high school about feeling all alone. And so in the novel, there's a young girl who doesn't know what to do. What do you do if you have someone in your house that drinks? When you're young, you're really powerless to understand things.
Yeah. Well, before I even kind of ask about that a little bit, I need to know, what was your favorite grade to teach? Out of all, I mean, that's a wide array of ages. What was your favorite, and which one did you like the least?
Well, I have a couple of answers for that. Number one, the real answer is it depended on the class of students. That's the real answer.
That's fair.
Because there are some days where I really miss those amazing discussions with high school students about To Kill a Mockingbird and the wonderful things that I was a speech and drama teacher. I miss all that. But then, there were a lot of papers to grade. And so I got recertified to teach English as a second language. And I was actually teaching kids from all over the world. And I miss that tremendously. And I miss second graders learning to read for the first time, that I'm giving them those strategies to become a better reader. It's just like there's nothing like teaching someone to read and for them to really take off and then ask for another book and another book. It's really cool.
I guess I do kind of maybe want to just jump in, and I'll kind of be looking back and forth. So if it looks like my eyes are wandering, I got some notes up on this screen.
Okay.
I want to talk about I think first, I guess, we can maybe talk about like the Veterans Day and your father, him, because I mean, it sounds like with his, struggles with alcohol came from, some other things. And when we had talked, you had said, you're like, I really don't know if the struggles with alcohol were before or after the war. Maybe it perpetrated another, but today being Veterans Day, maybe you can kind of shed some light on what that experience looked like for you with your father and that time frame. And
Sure. I think my mother, who knew him, would tell you that she thinks he did become addicted to the morphine when he was, because he was shot more than once. And I think there's a lot we still don't understand even today, right? This is why there's a problem with prescription drugs. I'm only can guess that maybe some people obviously have a propensity toward addiction based on their own DNA, but my father definitely came home from the war a changed man. And my mother would talk about the night sweats and the nightmares a little bit. But see, my father never, ever, ever talked to us about it. He would watch movies late at night, war movies, and by himself, and drink bourbon and smoke a cigarette. And maybe if he had had sons, it might have been different. I don't know. He had 6 daughters, not a son.
Wow.
But yeah, so that probably was that could contribute to anybody's mental health, right? But no, I think he just struggled, and I do have a memory that I can't talk about with my mom now that she's passed, of him being taken away in a straitjacket. I think I was maybe 7, maybe 6. And I just remember this crazy, chaotic scene in my living room in Kensington, Maryland, of them trying to get my father into what they call a straitjacket. What happened before, what led up to it, I don't know. I just don't know any of that. But I think that he needed treatment, and he didn't believe in psychiatric help. And I will tell you that that's the main difference between my father and myself. I have gotten treatment and continue to get treatment for anxiety myself. And I think that there's a real, it's just not something that people want to talk about, which is, I'm glad you're doing this podcast. No, nobody wants to admit that there's anything wrong, that they have thoughts that aren't that are negative. And I think a lot of people struggle with some degree of mental illness, because if you look it up in the dictionary, mental illness just says health conditions involving emotion, thinking, behavior, or a combination. So pretty broad definition, right?
Very.
Yeah. He was a painter too, who didn't paint. He took a job to support a family, and there was no joy in that job. And also in that generation, it was a man had more, it's totally, I think it's a lot different today, but back then a man's job was to earn the money, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. And I don't know that he had many outlets.
Yeah. Do you almost feel like maybe if he did, it could have been more beneficial for him? Like if even just like hypothesizing about it?
I do. I do remember my older sisters were severe stutterers. And apparently it's common in identical twins. And I remember, I think my sister Karen might have been in, I don't know, 6th grade, 7th grade, maybe older, but she asked my parents to see a psychiatrist. And their answer was no, you don't need that. And my sister went on to become an alcoholic herself. And I think, in this book, I decided to have different family members react to the disease differently. It's very common if you have a parent that's an alcoholic that your genes, it's in your genetic that you can. So in this book, I had a character who became an alcoholic. I had another character who ran off to get married, to escape, to get out of the household, another common thing. And the third person got help. And I had someone ask me recently, because she had just read it. She said, "Are you Cicely, I guess, but her nickname is C. Are you C in this book?" And I said, "Yeah." I mean, not that I was perfect, and not that I haven't had my own struggles, but I wasn't afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, from the lineage underneath your father, you had other family members that kind of experienced their own struggles, like your siblings. Did you ever have any sort of struggles with it? And if you did or didn't, like what how was that kind of journey for you?
I think that the way it affected me personally was through anxiety. And there's this anxiety that I will turn out like them. So I do have to be very mindful of my drinking. And I wish I didn't drink at all. And that was at one time a goal for me. I think now it's more about managing it and being aware of it and measuring it. But I think the anxiety is the thing. If you grow up in an alcoholic family, there's a lot of times where you have no control over things. So you develop this pattern of, oh no, is this going to fall apart? Oh no, is he going to have an episode? Is my mother, at night, is my mother going to end up on the floor on her knees begging him to stop? I think when you grow up in an atmosphere where there's not what you call, where alcohol controls a lot of that behavior, you do grow up to be an anxious people. I want to be this person who's really laid back, that's just really, I'll tell you a funny thing, Devin. One of the first times I got treatment and I went to a counselor, and I sat across from her and I said, I don't like my personality. And, she looked at me, and I think she probably wanted to laugh, but she didn't. But she said very seriously, honey, we can't do that here in this office. So, so I had to develop other strategies. For me, one of the biggest ones was writing. When my father would rage or there was tension in the household, I journaled. I have a journal from age 13, 14, 15. I can look back and look at what I was thinking even at 21.
That's so cool.
It is so cool. And it's really helped me, because I don't think I could really figure out a lot of my feelings, but when I had to put them down on paper, then I would have these like, well, no wonder you're anxious. This is what's really bothering you.
Yeah. Then did you feel like it was almost kind of like a shortcut? Like once you opened up your journal, like you actually, like, was that a moment you only felt like there you could process your thoughts?
No, I think I was processing thoughts, but I think that helped me to identify them. Just like if you go and sit across from a counselor, sometimes you don't even know, you can see other people when they're in trouble or making mistakes, but sometimes you just can't, you don't have the ability to really see what you're doing. And if I can identify it on a piece of paper, then at least it was something I had to work with. And then I would say, all right, what are you going to do about this?
Yeah.
And I think I found drama. I got into acting. That's another way to release it. And I think exercise is really critical too, for anyone struggling with any kind of anxiety, or a craft or a project. If you can do something that quiets the mind, that's the whole issue. How can you quiet your mind? Because my mind sometimes can be a runaway train, like of negative thoughts, not anything positive. And Devin, the truth is, I don't understand sometimes where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it there sometimes I feel absolutely in total control of my life, and people that read my columns, they say, oh, I really enjoyed it. Oh, it's great. And you have such a great sense of humor and yada, yada. I think then there are other days that I just think, what the heck, what's going on? Where did all that come from?
And don't you feel though, it's also like super positive, a good thing to even just like be able to like acknowledge that?
People don't want to befriend people who they think lives are all perfect. As soon as you admit your own insecurity to anyone and are willing to talk about it, most people are drawn to that, because then they say to themselves, geez, I'm not the only one that thinks like that.
Yeah, right.
Like I can remember worried about my children because they weren't getting along. I have a boy and a girl, and there seemed to be a lot of sibling rivalry. One of the oldest, problems in the universe, right? But I remember going to the library and getting a book out and reading about sibling rivalry. And when I read about it and became educated about it, I felt better about myself as a parent, because I could see that I'm in that. There's things you can learn as a parent to help with sibling rivalry. And
Yeah, what did that book kind of talk about? I'm interested to hear about that.
well, it's been so long since I've read it, but I do think, I don't know if I can answer your question, but I do think that subconsciously sometimes we do favor one child more than the other. You ask any child, they'll, like the other day, my sister said something like, well, you were dad's favorite. And I was like, what? But I remember really trying to make an effort with my father. I remember reaching out because that's the kind of person I am. But I think that, our children perceive all the time, no matter how much you can try as a parent to treat them the same. You're not. My mother didn't treat us the same because my sister Karen was a severe stutterer. So she would make phone calls for her and, and just take and do whatever she could to make her life easier. Now, that doesn't mean she didn't also try to take her to therapy, but my mother did not treat all of her children the same because we were all not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone discovers that if they don't become a parent.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't have children yet, but like, you know, it takes so long for a child to develop, even
Yeah.
their brains and the experiences they have to learn. It's a very daunting task. It sounds like.
But I also think we all have, there's people that go through horrific things in life, and you say to yourself, well, how did they make it through? So I do think that no matter who your parents are, no matter what your upbringing is, that there are certain qualities that some of us have. We're fighters. We're fighters. And we're going to figure out a way. And that was me. I remember my getting lost one time, and I was probably about 7 or 8, and my sister Susie's only a year younger than I am. And she sat down on the edge of the curb and started crying. And I said, get up. Let's go knock on a door,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? And when you grow up in an alcoholic family, that goes back to that loss of control. I think of my family often when I was years ago. I think of them, they're on a boat, they're in the water, and there are oars, but nobody picks up the oars.
Interesting.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think you can live your life on your own terms. You have to work on it. You have to work on it. I'm a work in progress. I still see a counselor every now and then. I dip in. I go to Al-Anon meetings every Monday, where I'm surrounded by people that understand the disease. And a lot of people don't. If you haven't lived through it, you really do need to consider being in a program. And there are certified addiction specialists. And they're not every counselor is equal. So if you don't find help that you need, then you need to keep seeking it. I think that's the biggest problem, though. And I want to say this. I was standing behind a father and a teenager, and they were picking up their medicine from the pharmacist. And he said, how much is it? And it was 2 prescriptions. And I don't know, I was eavesdropping. I couldn't help it. So he had high blood pressure medication, and the other prescription was for a antidepressant.
Mm-hmm.
And he only had money. And he said, I'll take the blood pressure. We'll have to wait. And honest to God, it took everything I had not to storm that counter and shove the money in her hand, in their hands, which would not have been appropriate. But this is where I think a lot of our problem lies too. There are so many people in the world who are not educated, don't have enough money, and I don't mean educated by the fact that they're stupid, but they don't have the means to get the help that they need. They don't know where to turn. There isn't somebody, like in that girl's case, where was she going to get that help? And there's nothing wrong with taking a pill if it's the right pill. Not at all.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything you just said. um, it's sad because you think about how much medications can be if you don't have proper insurance. And I think that's kind of what kind of attracted me to seeing like some of the things NAMI does with, having resources throughout the country for people if they don't have anything.
Right.
And I think that's part of my goal and mission is down the line, see how there'd be ways that people can get help. And I don't think sometimes people know how challenging that world is.
Right.
And there's so many different challenging aspects of life, but we're discussing mental health here in particular. So, like medications are not cheap. They're not. And seeing a therapist is not cheap.
Right.
And seeing a psychiatrist is not cheap. And,
right.
like you said, proper education around that. They don't teach you in school about these things unless you're interested in college and you go take a psychology class.
In 10th grade, there was a class called oral communications, which I taught. And again, you had to stand up in front of your peers. And that was probably the biggest change I made in my life when I was in high school. They had an elective called speech. And I was a junior, but the class was mostly seniors, but I was the only junior that signed up. I would say to you that class changed my life because it wasn't that I was not able to speak or be a good speaker. I was afraid, like most people, of not being accepted. And so being a junior, when you get up in front and read a silly little poem, it was different things or readers theater, I became validated. And that was like a huge thing. So these programs like drama and music and the arts and all that, it goes back. That's usually the areas where a lot of you find a place where a lot of kids who might struggle their voices need to be heard.
Yeah. And it's even as I sit here and like say these things, I think to myself, even if those things were there in high school, would I have even felt aware enough to actually even cared to like, or would that just have been taken like math was, and I would have just been like, oh, forget this, And I think that that's also part of the situation too.
Yeah.
That like, I do when I said that, I thought about it, where if there was a class where they taught that type of stuff, maybe I would have enjoyed it. I would have been like, oh, that's my favorite class. But I probably, with the state that I was in of dealing with my own stuff, probably would have dealt with it the same way I did every other class, which was not beneficial. But I think when you look at that a little bit deeper, I think it's kind of, at that time, like, why was it that I felt that way about every single class, and maybe it becomes something ingrained in a new type of system, or, it's not just for me to figure out, but us as a whole collective to start figuring out, like, what do we do with maybe our next generation or what we have currently at our disposal.
It's so true what you're saying, Devin. There's so many kids who struggle in those years, in the middle school and in the high school years, with fitting in, belonging, dealing with their emotions, their feelings. And I don't know that I have the answer either.
Where we're very fortunate and blessed to have, the resources. And I think to myself, like, just what about those who don't? Because it's like, I almost didn't make it through. Right. And I had every resource, like, thank God, like, truly, like, I just sit back and I just say, thank God for that. Yet I've seen in groups and in therapy, whatever, that there's people out there that are not doing good.
Yeah.
And like I was saying, I don't have the answers. And I don't want to sit here and like claim to be an activist who has answers. No, but I think it's more so just for people to understand that, like, I think people are trying, and there are resources out there, and there are people that care and that are willing to help in some sort of fashion, and that they're not alone, is, I think, I don't know.
Reading is the way out for a lot of reading. You think about you right now as an adult, and also think about all these kids that are reading things that's how they can help themselves get through. My second novel is called Up in the Sky So Blue. And it's at the Browse About library here and Biblion Books and on Amazon. And I had an idea about what happens if a child can't even take care of a relative. And she lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother's memory is failing. And it's interesting because some people caught the eye of a particular woman who started her own company or organization called Alzheimer's Authors, Alts Authors. And it turns out, and I have so many friends right now whose parents are suffering with dementia and Alzheimer's, it turns out that there's this huge group of people writing about this topic. And if you want to know anything about this topic or how they've dealt with it or finding there's somebody that's written a similar story. And so it's become this huge support group. And it's on Twitter, it's #AltsAuthors. And I think that exists for almost every kind of topic that you can imagine in the world. And now people are savvy with their devices, and I think the way out for a lot of young people is through reading. And what happened is this book was really meant for, both of these books were meant for 4th and 5th graders, but I didn't know how to market to 4th and 5th graders anymore because I wasn't teaching. And it wasn't until the Browse About author, the young girl working there, I said, can you please put it in the kids section? Take it out of the adult section, please. Put it in the kids section. And I asked the same thing at Rehoboth Library. And for any child suffering with anything, just reading a book about someone else that might be going through a similar experience that you're going through makes them feel that they're less alone.
Mm-hmm.
That there's help.
And is that kind of where you went into like counseling or like the programs of like 12 steps or Al-Anon? Is that where you kind of felt like it benefited in a way? Like what drew you to, like, obviously your experience, but what made you stay? Not only go, but then what made you say, oh, this is actually beneficial to me?
Because my pattern of behavior was something they call stinking thinking, where nothing's really wrong. Nothing's really wrong. You've just let your own head spin out of control, or you're repeating patterns. And the pattern of behavior with an alcoholic is to do everything you can to get them to stop drinking. Everything you can to get them to stop drinking. But Al-Anon is for the person that's living with an alcoholic. How does that person, what is their role in it? I don't have to get caught up in the drama. There are people that leave. There are people that just, that the program is for yourself. I can only take care of me. There's slogans you use. Then you can apply them whether you have a person in your home that's drinking, or you can apply them with somebody you're not getting a problem at work. You didn't cause it. You can't control it. You can't cure it. They're called the 3 C's. And there's all these little slogans that you hear about, and you realize, just even in your personal life, you want your spouse to do yada, yada, yada. Well, You got to get in your own head. It's not your job. It's not my job to find out what my husband should do with his retirement time. He gets to choose. So what happens to an adult child of an alcoholic is they become wanting to control so many things, even what's on the Thanksgiving table. It's crazy. And it manifests itself in different people in different ways.
And you almost wonder, or like, I think maybe it's because of like the lack of control that was felt.
You know, my mother had no problem with me rescuing my sister Susie, because if I rescued my sister, then she didn't have to. That was what I was taught to believe was my role. Fix it. Solve the problem. You know. People, it's a problem in the world. That's why there's so much road rage and things like that. People think that they've got to figure out, they've got to look at somebody else, what they're doing wrong. And they don't look at what they're doing wrong. You always have a choice.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. It froze you, and then
who knows?
Yeah, but you were saying you had a note. You have a note. You said you still have a note that said something.
Yeah. I still have a note that says you have a choice on it, because I was thinking that I was handling my family crisis, and I began teaching school, and I literally froze and I couldn't go into the classroom. My grief was just sort of overwhelming after my mother's death. And I went to a counselor, and that's another thing. If you work and you have a good employee, there is something called employee assistance, and there are people, companies that work with larger corporations that provide programs for their people. And I said, my father died of alcoholism and my mother committed suicide. What's going to happen to me? And she said, you have a choice. And I go into every single one of the sessions I've ever taken with any counselor, and I use these little notebooks, and I wrote it down on a piece of paper. And I tell people that all the time when they feel like their world's imploding. I say, you have a choice. Even an alcoholic, especially an alcoholic, they know they need help. You can only live in that world for so long sometimes before they call what's bottom out, but you have a choice, and you have a choice too on how you react to that person. You can let them destroy your life, or you can say, like a lot of parents I know with young people, adults who've come back into the house because their lives have become unmanageable. When their child is 50 years old or 30 or whatever and starts drinking, you can say, I'm sorry, you can't live here. You can't live here. Because you living here is going to make me sick. And that's the problem. That's why they call alcoholism a family disease, because it affects everyone. And I know people whose children are no longer here, just like some of my siblings are no longer here. And the bottom line is we couldn't save them. We couldn't. You can make yourself sick trying. And that's why I go to Al-Anon, to learn what is my role in life.
I'm curious as to the uncomfortability that comes with setting boundaries in those situations. And like, I'm curious about the where do you even begin to trust yourself in that?
Most people in Al-Anon get a sponsor, and when they find themselves slipping back into that role, they can call that person for a reality check. And a lot of us do slip back in and out of those rules. We think it's our brother or sister, and so we should help them. I remember, giving money, giving groceries. I mean, certain things you can do, but then it's enabling. You hear a lot about enabling. And so usually an alcoholic is actually in a relationship with someone who is enabling them to still be an alcoholic, but they don't see it that way. And it's so complicated,
I think that's very, very precise to say. It's very accurate, or very accurate that it's extremely complex. Like, these are complex situations. They're not simple, and that's why they require such diligence and mindfulness, learning about mindfulness for yourself, but so you can be mindful of a situation that is very complex. Yeah. I wanted to touch base. You had mentioned to me yesterday, and then I had also found the article. You had a perspective on your son as he was getting ready to go to war, I believe.
Right.
Yeah. Would you want to share a little bit about that? That seemed like a very cool perspective you had.
Yeah, I think that probably
kind of shift gears.
Yeah, well, and also could be a good place to end today, but because it is Veterans Day. But I was very torn because my son wasn't sure what he wanted to do with his life. And I wanted him to go to college. And he did try that, and it wasn't working for him. He decided to enlist in the Army Reserve, and that was his choice. And I wanted to try to respect that choice. But as a parent, as a mother, at that time, I did not believe we should be in a war in Iraq. And I was driving through an intersection near my home, and on one side of the street were people protesting, bring our troops home. And on another side of the street, people were holding up placards that said, support our troops. And I happened to be in the kitchen and hear a broadcast where Tom Brokaw was interviewing Tom Hanks about the opening of the World War II memorial in New Orleans. And he said, Tom Hanks said, of veterans, he said, it's amazing how people just went to war and then they came home and were able to put up Christmas trees. Well, first of all, that's not the exact quote, but it took me a long time researching, going back and playing it over and over again so I could get it right. And I wrote this piece, an op-ed piece, and it was called My Father, My Son. And in that article, I wrote about my dilemma as a parent of wanting to support and then remembering what made my dad happy, and what happened to him as a result, I think, of his service in the war, maybe not getting help for PTSD. So it was a really powerful piece, and I was very proud of it. And I made sure that I asked my son's permission before I submitted it to the newspaper, because I didn't want to get him in any trouble. When you're in the military, you do what they tell you to do, and kind of thing. And he was okay with it because it was really a personal piece.
What was the concern like for you? I mean, I'm sure there's some obvious ones, but like when you were kind of digesting that information, thinking about your son and the possibility of history repeating itself, what was going through your head at the time?
Well, I didn't want him to come home in a body bag. It was selfish. It was purely I don't want you to do this because I don't want you to be put in harm's way. And this is a real difficult thing to say out loud, especially right now when there's all these veterans who might think I'm a horrible human being for saying that. I mean, the courage that it takes to serve our country, the sacrifices that are made are just, I don't even know where to begin. So there's a part of me that that was really worried about what people would think of this piece, but it's really about my moral dilemma. I in no way believe that serving our country is in any way a negative thing. But I do believe this. I do believe, because I grew up in the Vietnam era and the war, and those friends of mine came home damaged. And there's very little difference between that damage. Well, they say there isn't any difference, but people were so anti-war that they came home feeling that everything they had done was for naught. And then here comes this situation where we pulled out of Afghanistan, and the same exact thing happened. What about all those people who devoted years of their life to what they believed was the right behavior, and still believe that it was right to be there and do what we do? It is just so complicated. What's wrong with all of this and what's wrong with all of these pictures is we definitely do not have in place enough programming for veterans. We need more support for veterans. The horrors of what they experienced in war is not is something they're finally realizing, that in order to just stop talking about it, you have to talk about it. If you don't talk about it, it'll kill you.
Cause internal war. Yeah. And I get what you're saying too, in the sense of I think it's not about the opinion of what you're saying, but just your experience with it. And due to your experiences, and I'm going to link the article if people are interested in
Sure.
reading it as well. And I also think that they're, justified feelings, who would want to have history repeat itself after that, but it is there's a war. I've always felt in my head, I've thought like World War III was never going to be a physical one. Like World War III was going to be something of either the mind or spirit, and here we are like dealing with the pandemic. But I don't know. I've pondered that idea where this time around World War III was going to happen, and it wasn't going to be the way we thought it was. And I think part of it was going to be like war with ourselves. But like you said, we have that choice to do something about it. And that's the resources. I'm no expert with veterans nor opinions and information about the war and everything like that. But what I do know is that like those are human beings that are going to war, and their sons, husbands, uncles, wives, and they're humans, and the human spirit endures something pretty intense there. So I would pray that we can get that out there, because it's like even the wars we all experience in our own life, whether you're on the battlefield in Afghanistan or in the home of an alcoholic or in an abusive relationship of infidelity or whatever, like toxic, whatever it is,
right.
You're being imprinted with some sort of chemical reaction and some sort of just experience that gets learned. And I hope for the same things too. And I do think that that's a good way to kind of wrap it up. And I've been asking this kind of for everyone that's been on too, because that's what I hope, NAMI can possibly help with somebody with, is that they have some sort of resource to turn to. But I'm curious, maybe like, what are some things that you do for yourself these days, maybe that are outside of like, say like an Al-Anon program? We've established, you're a believer with that, and you've put that into your lifestyle. But like, what are some other things you do with your writing, maybe like for fun, that, helps with your self-care? And then like, what would you maybe say to somebody, and it's an open-ended question, that might be hesitant to kind of either open up or speak up about something that's on their mind or kind of face their own fears? Like, what's
Well,
your...
those are like two different questions.
Yes, there are two questions for you.
Yeah, I think we have kind of answered the second part, which is that you do need to find someone that ask for help. What I don't know what that looks like for everyone, but don't keep it in. And then the answer to the other question is create time for yourself. Go to the movies, go to the cinema art theater and watch some of these independent films. Exercise. If you can't afford to join a gym, which I hate gyms, walk. You know, my friend in Vermont would say there's no such thing as cold weather. There's just inadequate clothing.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
That's true.
Get out the door and walk, you know. There's a film called Almost Sunrise where these two Vietnam vets literally walked across country to visit their buddy, their war buddy, and to try to discover what to learn along the way. And walking is like the best thing you can do for your body. Your body needs movement. I also discovered yoga and meditation. And so again, if you can, there's things online, there's apps, there's tapes, there's things that are free. You don't have to have a lot of money to go join a yoga class either. Breathing.
Meditation is free as free can be.
Well, you know, anxiety, what happens when you're anxious about anything, you start breathing erratically. You're not taking the deep breaths. You're not breathing from your diaphragm. So look into some breathing programs and apps and music that you can listen to and know when you need to shut down. You know, it's very hard to live with me because my father, because he had the war injuries, he didn't allow any noise. And and you would not know that there were that many kids living in my house and we were not allowed to make noise. But to this day, I have to shut TVs off and music off and create calm. Create a space where I don't want all these external things and lights, that anything. So those are some things you can do for yourself. You know, find a quiet space, breathe, and go outside. Just go outside and look at the leaves. Just right now with fall, just look at the leaves and find something to be grateful for, because there's always something. Some people in Al-Anon start every single day with a gratitude list, because no matter what's going on in your life, and I don't mean any of this, there's always something to celebrate. And the positive attitude is really what will get you through. And it goes back to that. You have a choice.
Yeah. Amen. Well, thank you for sharing all of that.
One last thing. You said amen. And that's not everybody's strategies, but you know, if you are a spiritual person, or if you do believe in a higher power, whatever that looks like, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Go to your church, your synagogue, wherever.
This episode is sponsored by Delaware Hyperbarics. Reduce your symptoms, speed your recovery, and reclaim your body at Delaware Hyperbarics, located in Lewes, Delaware. Their facility offers hyperbaric chambers, therapeutic massage, myofascial release, extracorporeal pulse activation therapy, red light therapy, low-level laser therapy, massage for motor vehicle accidents, active isolated stretching, and infrared saunas. To learn more, you can go to DelawareHyperbarics.com or call 302-313-5555. NAMI envisions a world where all people affected by mental health can live healthy, fulfilling lives, supported by a community that cares. NAMI provides advocacy, education, support, and public awareness so that all individuals and families affected by mental health can build better lives. Today, NAMI is an alliance of more than 600 local affiliates and 48 state organizations who work in your communities to raise awareness and provide support and education that was not previously available to those in need. Crosstown Walkers stands by organizations like NAMI. To show your support, go to donate.nami.org/crosstownwalkers, or you can head to crosstownwalkers.com/fundraiser to find more information.